Quiet on the set, please.
Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
And action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Hey everybody, welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. Hi Nan.
Hey, Steve.
The thing about us, we really pride ourselves on maybe showing some love to some of the people that don't get a lot of love shown to them. Like we talk about some of the lesser known actors and writers and directors.
Right.
Well, this episode is right up that alley. You may remember, I think it was episode number, was it 144 that we did?
I think it was 144.
It was all about the acting dynasties of classic Hollywood. We talked about the Fondas and the Barrymores and the Houstons and, all those great families. Well, there's another acting dynasty. Well, if you can consider a brother-sister duo a dynasty.
I think it's a dynasty.
I think it's a dynasty.
These two make it a dynasty.
They are. And you may not know their names, but you absolutely will know their faces because they're some of the most beloved character actors that we've ever seen in film and television. And between the two of them, I think they've had over 300 credits, film and television. So very prolific, very beloved, especially by TV audiences in the probably 60s on up.
Yes.
So, the one thing about this brother-sister duo is if they're in a movie, at least part of that movie is going to be good.
Right, that's true.
Of course, I'm talking about Jack Albertson and his older sister, Mabel Albertson. And so today, we're going to talk about their lives, their careers, and the amazing bond they had as siblings.
Well, for nearly half a century, Jack and Mabel Albertson were two of the most dependable and beloved character actors in American film and television. They were rarely the stars of a production, but they nevertheless possessed a remarkable ability to steal scenes without even trying.
Oh, every time they would steal that scene. Yes.
Whether playing an affectionate grandfather, a meddlesome neighbor, an overprotective mother, or an eccentric aunt, they never seemed to be performing. They just simply felt real. Now, their story is all the more remarkable because neither one of them had famous parents or were in any way connected to Hollywood with a studio contract or influential connections. Every opportunity that they had to be earned through persistence and talent and decades of hard work. Together, they experienced really virtually every chapter of 20th century entertainment, from vaudeville to radio to Broadway to motion pictures, and then ultimately to television.
Yeah. And Jack Albertson, he ultimately achieved probably the rarest thing you can do as an actor. He ended up winning a Tony, an Oscar, and a couple of Emmys. The triple crown. He was just one Grammy away from EGOT.
Yeah,
so he didn't quite make it.
He didn't do an audiobook, but they didn't have them back then.
I know, exactly. But you know what? Moviegoers know Jack Albertson probably best as Grandpa Joe in the 1971 fantasy film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which of course starred Gene Wilder. Now, television audiences know him best probably from the TV sitcom Chico and the Man. But however, before all this success came, Jack Albertson was a workhorse. It did not come overnight for him. He had to work for his fame and his success. He ended up dancing in vaudeville. He appeared in burlesque houses. He struggled on Broadway. He would take any job he could to continue to act and to continue to follow that dream.
His older sister, Mabel Albertson, followed a different but equally impressive path. Rather than becoming a headline-making star, she quietly established herself as one of television's finest character actresses.
Yes.
You can't see her face without smiling.
You just love her. I love her.
Week after week, she would appear on America's most popular sitcoms, bringing warmth and impeccable comic timing and effortless authenticity to every single role, whether she was on the Andy Griffith Show or the Dick Van Dyke Show or the Patty Duke Show or dozens of other series, which we will talk about, she became one of those instantly recognizable faces audiences loved, even if they couldn't always remember her name. And, of course, no one can forget her as the favorite meddling mother-in-law, Mother Stevens, on the beloved sitcom Bewitched.
Mother Stevens.
Yes.
I love Mother
Me
Stevens.
too. That's my favorite of her
I
roles.
know. That's what I remember her best from.
Mhm.
Now, Jack and Mabel, they grew up in Massachusetts, and they were the children of Russian Jewish immigrants, Leopold and Flora Albertson. And they had come at the turn of the century as part of this wave of immigration, looking for better opportunities and, wanting the chance to work hard to make a better life for their children. Well, money was scarce in the Albertson household, but, they had laughter and they had storytelling and they had music. I mean, that's what that family was full of. So in that regard, they were a very wealthy family.
Right. Mabel was born on July 24th, 1901 in Haverhill, Massachusetts. She became something of a trailblazer for younger brother Jack, who was born 6 years later in Malden, Massachusetts on June 16th, 1907. Both children enjoyed entertaining their relatives and friends and demonstrating an ease in front of audiences long before they considered acting as a profession. As America entered a new era of entertainment with vaudeville flourishing and Broadway booming and motion pictures rapidly growing in popularity, both siblings found themselves drawn toward the stage. And Mabel learned that comedy suited her perfectly. And she learned that early. She possessed an instinctive understanding that the funniest performances came not from exaggerated antics, but from absolute sincerity. And her friends admired her quick wit and her engaging personality, qualities that would later define her work on radio and on television.
Yeah. Now, Jack, he became fascinated with every aspect of entertainment. I mean, he would study comedians and singers and dancers and people that did variety acts. But the thing about Jack, he never limited himself to one corner of the entertainment industry. He wanted to know everything. And I think this is one of the greatest strengths he had as an actor because it made him adaptable. So he could just really get in there and go with any medium that the entertainment industry could throw at him. Just as importantly was his relationship with Mabel because, you hear about all these siblings in Hollywood that hated each other.
Yes.
Yes, I'm talking about Olivia and Joan, maybe. But that was not the case with Jack and Mabel. They truly were always close. They loved each other. They supported each other so much. I mean, rather than trying to compete with Jack when he started coming up, Mabel, she really encouraged him. She really, tried to buoy him up. And Jack was so proud of her. He constantly talked about the great work she was doing. So I think it was a matter of they both understood how difficult it was to carve out any type of career in show business. So I think this is what really bonded them and made them even closer.
Right. Well, for Mabel, performing began almost as soon as her childhood ended. She later recalled earning $5 a performance at the age of 13, which would have been a nice chunk of change.
You're a working actor at 13.
Yes. Well, and what she was doing is she was accompanying a dramatic reader on piano behind decorative palm trees. I'm trying to imagine that.
What a visual.
Yeah, it wasn't very glamorous, but it gave her an early taste of professional entertainment. So after studying at the New England School of Speech and Expression,
Ooh.
She worked steadily in stock companies and in vaudeville and nightclubs and radio, gradually developing the versatility that would later make her invaluable to television audiences.
Yes. Now, Jack's journey was a little less direct than that. I mean, growing up in a family where, financial survival really took precedence over any type of, ambition towards the arts. Jack had to basically drop out of school and get to work to help the family. I mean, he worked in factories. He worked at a shoe plant. He was a racker at a local pool hall. And in fact, he even became a pretty capable pool hustler at this same pool hall, which I love that.
Yeah.
And I think along the way, doing these jobs to help support the family, he met all these colorful characters. And I think they really influenced him later on in some of the performances that he would create on film and television. And it's funny because it was actually at one of these pool halls that he learned to tap dance, which it makes no sense whatsoever. But at this one particular pool hall, in between games, the locals would entertain each other. They would sing, they would dance. There's a couple of guys who were tap dancers, and Jack was fascinated. So he got these guys to teach him how to tap dance, and he was really good at it. So then he would go home, and his education would continue because Mabel would then teach him all the basic time steps for tap dancing. Which
is required,
yeah,
yes.
which again shows you how Mabel really tried to
Yes.
help buoy him up and help support him and prepare his future.
Exactly.
So I love that. Yeah.
Me too. Determined to escape factory life, Jack joined a singing quartet called the Golden Rule 4. And their rehearsals often took place beneath a railroad bridge because it offered good acoustics.
Oh, interesting.
Sort of like singing in the shower, maybe.
Maybe. I like that.
And perhaps more importantly, it was free. The place was free. Like so many aspiring performers of the 1920s, they created opportunities wherever they could. And eventually, Jack made the inevitable journey to New York, carrying little more than determination and optimism. But times were tough. And so he struggled at first. During his earliest months, he was so short of money that he sometimes rode the subway all night for a nickel rather than paying for a room, which is so sad. Hiding from transit workers at the end of the line. In warmer weather, he would occasionally sleep on benches in Central Park. Like countless young performers before him, he discovered that talent alone rarely guarantees success.
But his fortunes did change because he eventually joined a group called the Dancing Versailles Sisters, which I love that.
Yeah, me too.
And it was vaudeville. Yeah, of course, it wasn't Broadway, but it was a steady paycheck. It was great experience because he got to perform almost every single night. Now, in those days, to be a vaudeville performer, you had to be able to sing and dance and tell jokes and, entertain an audience no matter what happened. Because sometimes those vaudeville houses got pretty rowdy, so you had to control that audience. And Jack was particularly good at this. I mean, he thrived in front of a live audience. He was great with them, and he really enjoyed entertaining people. And I think early on in his career, he learned maybe one of the most important lessons about show business, and that is that the audience always comes first. As vaudeville slowly gave way to burlesque, Jack had to pivot. And he did. So what he did, he put together this soft shoe dance number that he did with another comedian you might have heard of named Phil Silvers, which I'm trying to imagine the two of them doing a soft shoe number.
I know.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Which is so great. And so, they ended up performing at the famous Minsky burlesque circuit. But the thing about this for Jack is he got the opportunity to see all these seasoned comedians perform in these burlesque houses. I think he learned a lot about comedy from these old guys. He learned that, sometimes a subtle reaction was much funnier than a real over-the-top mugging reaction. And oftentimes sincerity would get a bigger laugh than trying to really milk the audience for a laugh.
Yes.
And I think these became trademarks for his career as he entered television and film later on.
Well, meanwhile, Mabel continued building her own career on stage and radio, where she displayed an equally impressive understanding of character and comic timing. She also began writing for radio, demonstrating her talent extended well beyond performing. She understood not only how to deliver a joke, but how the comedy was constructed. So I'm sure that really helped her in television later. Neither sibling, though, experienced overnight success. Instead, they accumulated something far more valuable, experience. So every theater, every radio studio, every nightclub engagement, and every touring production added another layer to their education that would eventually make them both indispensable character actors. It simply took Hollywood, as it sometimes does, a little longer to discover what audiences already knew.
Yeah. And for me, one of the qualities I think that distinguished them from their contemporaries was their remarkable ability to adapt. I mean, the entertainment industry was changing at such a speed. And, vaudeville gave way to burlesque, which gave way to radio, which gave way to movies, which gave way to television. And so many really wonderful performers just got stranded and they got left behind because, the public taste was changing so quickly and they weren't able to keep up. Well, that was not the case with Jack and Mabel. I mean, they were able to evolve with the times, keep working, and keep it moving.
Well, for Mabel, her career took a brief backseat after her marriage to syndicated newspaper columnist Harold Austin Ripley in the early 1920s. They were only married for a few years, but they had two sons, one of whom was George England, who would later go on to become a writer and producer on such TV shows as The Eddie Fisher Show. He also directed Marlon Brando in The Ugly Americans in 1963. And from 1953 to 1979, he was married to Academy Award-winning actress Cloris Leachman.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, small world.
And after Mabel's divorce, she became busier than ever. TV was the perfect medium for her because she could very quickly drum up warmth and intelligence and this comic authority without really seeming to be chasing the joke, which some comedians do, and it's so annoying. She didn't do that. And then directors really appreciated and valued her because they realized that they could just plop her down into any situation comedy and she could immediately get into the rhythm of the show and create these really wonderful, believable characters.
Well, over the next 2 decades, her resume became a tour through television's
Yes.
golden age. She appeared on, get this, The Donna Reed Show, The Patty Duke Show, The Dick Van Dyke Show, The Andy Griffith Show, when every show was named after the star,
Yes,
right?
yes, exactly.
The Mothers-in-Law, Love American Style, Here's Lucy, The Odd Couple, and dozens of other series. Yet, as we mentioned in the introduction, no role became more closely associated with her than Mother Stevens, Darren's frequently disapproving but well-meaning mother on Bewitched.
Nobody could purse her lips like Mother Stevens.
No, and just stare or just give Samantha a look, right? Lesser actresses might have played the character as shrill or
Yes.
overbearing, but Mabel Albertson understood that Mother Stevens was funniest when she was sincerely believing that she was helping. She was helping Darren, right? Her concern for Darren, her son, mixed with barely concealed skepticism toward Samantha's, shall we say, unusual household.
That's a nice way to say it.
Yeah, it created one of the show's most memorable recurring characters.
And television producers, they treasured performers like Mabel because she was the consummate professional, really. She would show up, she knew her lines, she was on time, she had respect for every single person there. But plus, she could just get into the rhythm of an already established show so quickly and so beautifully. And when you think about the really harsh productions of television, it is tough. So, producers really like someone like her who could just plop in, get into the groove of everything, and just really create these really wonderful, wonderful performances.
Right. Well, around this time, Mabel found love again when she married comedy writer Ken England in 1946. England was already an accomplished Hollywood writer, having penned the scripts for movies such as No No Nanette, 1940, Springtime in the Rockies, 1942, Sweet Rosie O'Grady, 1943, and The Unseen, 1945. He would also later go on to write such hits as The Secret Life of Walter Mitty,
Yes, that's
1947, Good Sam, 1948, and The Caddy in 1953. Now, obviously, the couple shared the love of storytelling and humor. I can imagine those dinner conversations, right?
Right.
However, as suited as they seemed for each other, they did end up divorcing in 1950.
Yeah. Now, while Mabel found success in Hollywood, Jack stayed behind in New York, but he did find love there. He married actress June Wallace Thompson, and they eventually had a daughter, Maura, and then Maura eventually married that wonderful actor Wes Studi. So at one point, I love this, Mabel and Jack had children that were married to well-known actors.
Yeah,
So,
interesting.
yeah, well, back in New York, Jack was struggling through the whole theatrical scene. Broadway was great, and it provided opportunity, but it didn't provide a lot of stability. He would open in a show with great expectations, only to have it close in a few weeks. Or if he did find some success with a Broadway play, the problem was the minute it ended, he went back to that whole routine of being an unemployed actor. He had to hit the pavement and find his next audition and book a job. And, with this came all this financial anxiety,
Yes.
which is really tough. But every role he did just made him a better actor. And it transformed him from being, a really accomplished entertainer to being a remarkably nuanced actor.
Well, and unlike many performers who carefully cultivated a glamorous screen image, Jack really embraced ordinary people.
Yeah.
His expressive face, his slightly rumpled appearance, in more than one role, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
oh,
that was
yes.
kind of his thing.
Yeah.
And his natural warmth made him instantly believable as fathers and bartenders and shopkeepers and teachers and lifelong dreamers. So rather than limiting his career, his everyman quality became one of his greatest strengths. Audiences recognized themselves in Jack.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and around 1940, Jack decided to head to Hollywood to see what opportunities might be there for him.
I hope Mabel put him up.
Yeah, I hope Mabel gave him that spare bedroom.
I know, right?
But, you know, he would spend the next decade or so kind of bouncing back and forth from Hollywood to the Broadway stage. But he did start working in motion pictures. He started booking these small supporting roles. One that comes to mind is The Miracle on 34th Street.
Yes,
Remember, he
that
played
small
Al,
role,
the mail
yes.
sorter, who ends up kind of being the hero a little bit.
Yeah.
And then he was also in The Harder They Fall, 1956, where he played Pop, one of the boxing trainers. And he also was in Man of a Thousand Faces, 1957, where he played a studio doctor. But work just kept coming his way. He was in Teacher's Pet, 1958, and The Shaggy Dog, 1959. Lover Come Back with Doris Day, which I love, 1961, and Days of Wine and Roses, 1962. I mean, he just kept working. And he even appeared in count them, two Elvis Presley movies in 1964, Kissin' Cousins and Roustabout.
Well, before we get more into the life and career of Mabel and Jack Albertson and sort of more of the roles that we really know them
Yes.
from, it's time for this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
And this is a doozy. I love this question. Jack Albertson did something that very few people did. He won an Oscar and a Tony for playing the very same character.
Mm-hmm.
There's 9 other performers who did that. How many of those 9 can you name?
Eek, that's a tough
That's a
question.
challenging one.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be right back with the answer to that and more about Mabel and Jack Albertson after this.
All right, Steve and Ann will be right back, but first another stop on the Hollywood tour. Now, in just a moment, Steve and Ann will be discussing Jack Albertson's heartbreaking portrayal in the play and film version of The Subject Was Roses. Patricia Neal was one of his co-stars in the film, and she received an Academy Award for that. In Neal's autobiography, Just As I Am, she describes the film as a career milestone for her because making the film convinced her she was still every bit the actress she was before her stroke. She also described her fear of memorizing a 5-page monologue that she had to do in one take, but her momentary fright quickly gave way to pride as she successfully completed it without any problem. In Jack Albertson's Oscar-moving acceptance speech, he made fun of the fact that his award was the first of the night, saying, "It's not the first time I've been an opening act," a nod to his many years in vaudeville. He also paid tribute to his co-stars, saying, quote, "I'd like to thank that wonderful, wonderful actress and a great woman, Patricia Neal." Later backstage, he added, "Frank Gilroy fought for a year to make sure I got this part in the film, and I shall never forget him for it. I've been kicking around this business about 40 years, and I'm not about to be knocked over by the red carpet treatment." And now, back to Steve and Ann from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Hey everybody, welcome back to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. Before we get further into the life and career of Jack and Mabel Albertson, we're going to give a special shout out to our listener of the week. Now this week we have a great listener. It is David Standing. David was so nice, he actually sent us a link to the movie Annapolis Salute, which we had talked about on a previous episode, which Marcia Hunt mentioned as her least favorite movie of her entire career. And I did get a chance to watch it, David, and Marcia might have been right.
Oh boy, oh boy.
You know what? It's not offensive. It's sweet, but it's definitely not
one of her stronger
finest
ones.
moment.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Well,
So
thank
thank
you
you.
so much, David. That was very kind. Well, we were talking about Jack and Mabel, and they're sort of at the midpoint. They're in the 50s in
Yeah.
their lives and careers. So Mabel has also made her way to the West Coast and was working nonstop in film and television. She can be seen in movies like About Mrs. Leslie, 1954, with Shirley Booth.
Yes.
Black Widow, 1954, with Van Heflin, who we just did an episode
That's
about.
right.
And Gene Tierney and Ginger Rogers. The Cobweb, 1955, with Richard Widmark, Lauren Bacall, and Gloria Graham.
Good old Gloria.
Ransom, 1956, with Glenn Ford and Donna Reed. And The Long Hot Summer, 1958, with Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward. And her list of TV shows, it just goes on and on. She guest starred. It's an early television history lesson.
Oh, every classic early show.
Yeah, the George Burns and Gracie Allen Show, Four-Star Playhouse, The Red Skelton Hour, December Bride, and Bachelor Father.
Yeah, yeah. Now for Jack, despite appearing in motion pictures pretty steadily now, his real break finally came at the hands of Broadway, which is interesting, because he'd already kind of shifted to movies by this point. But, the Frank D. Gilroy haunting family drama, The Subject Was Roses. Ugh, if you don't know this play, it is so good. It really tells the story of the Cleary family and their struggles to connect after World War II. Now, in this play, Jack Albertson got cast as the patriarch, John Cleary, who has trouble really connecting with his son, who's just come back from the war. And he's also dealing with disappointment and this emotional distance with his wife. Now, Jack Albertson, he brings such raw emotional honesty to this portrayal. I think it's the best work he's ever done in his entire career. He had a lot of great help from his co-stars, though, because there was the great Broadway actress Irene Daly played his wife, and there was a young up-and-coming actor who played his son, and that was Martin Sheen.
Amazing.
One of his first jobs ever. Audiences really discovered that beneath the comic gifts that Jack Albertson clearly had, he had this emotional depth that I don't think a lot of people knew was there.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing to watch.
Interesting side note, Lindsay and I saw a production of The Subject Was Roses at the Mark Taper Forum maybe 10 years ago, and Martin Sheen was playing the father.
I remember when he did that. Yeah. That was what a treat to see him play the father role.
And he was so good. One of my favorites.
Me too.
Well, the original production of The Subject Was Roses was a Broadway triumph, winning the Pulitzer Prize for Drama. And Jack's performance earned him the 1965 Tony Award, as you mentioned, for Best Featured Actor in a Play, validating more than 3 decades of perseverance. So it ain't over yet, folks.
Never too late.
The award represented far more than professional recognition. It was proof that the young man who had once slept on subway trains and danced in burlesque houses had finally reached the highest levels of American theater. And Hollywood, of course, took notice immediately.
Oh, as they always do.
Yeah.
When The Subject Was Roses was made into a motion picture, Jack Albertson and Martin Sheen actually were asked to recreate their roles, which never happens.
They always want a big old movie star.
Exactly. So, that was wonderful for them. However, they did replace the mother with actress Patricia Neal. Now, Patricia Neal was just recovering from her debilitating stroke that we all remember she had.
Right.
And she's often said that if it weren't for the kindness and the patience of Martin Sheen and Jack Albertson, she would not have made it through the production. And Martin Sheen also looked up to Jack Albertson as a mentor. And he once said many, many years later in an interview, I think with the New York Times, he said, and this is a quote, and I love this, I want to get it right, so I'm just going to go to it. He said, Jack Albertson had this tremendous acting talent. And I remember watching him, and his body would physically shake with emotion during certain lines, which is just thrilling. Because a lot of times, like you just mentioned, you perform on Broadway, you create a role, it becomes the talk of the town, you are lauded, you get awards. Hollywood comes into town, they make a movie out of it, and you get shoved aside for a big old movie star.
I think about Kathy Bates, who was not a big star when she did
Frankie
and Johnny,
yeah.
and Michelle Pfeiffer got the role.
So many of those people, Carol Channing, Julie Andrews,
we
so
could
many
go
of them.
on
Yeah,
that's an episode.
So it was really rare for Jack to have the opportunity to transport his performance from the stage to the screen, and he brought all that emotional rawness to the screen. And I think because it was the screen, it almost made it even more intimate, which was so powerful. And for his work on The Subject Was Roses, the Academy that year gave him the Academy Award as Best Supporting Actor, and he was 61.
Wow. Well, his victory remains one of Hollywood's most inspiring reminders that extraordinary careers do not always follow conventional schedules.
Nope.
While many actors fear that opportunity fades with youth, Jack reached the pinnacle of his profession at an age when others were contemplating retirement. And at precisely the same time, Mabel was enjoying the busiest period of her television career. Now, neither sibling had been an overnight sensation. Instead, they demonstrated that persistence and craftsmanship and patience could sometimes accomplish what youthful fame could not.
Well said. I love that. Around this time, Mabel, she continued to carve out this niche for herself. I mean, nobody played these society women, these dowagers, these meddling mother-in-laws. Nobody played them better than she did. And around this time, she appears in 3 movies, which I think really helped carve out her screen persona.
Yes.
And there's, the first one is Barefoot in the Park, 1967. She plays the aunt. And then there's On a Clear Day You Can See Forever, 1970. And then best of all, What's Up, Doc, 1972. If you haven't seen this one, she is comic gold.
She is.
She really gets the whole ball rolling because she plays Mrs. Van Hoskins, and she shows up in a San Francisco hotel with her plaid suitcase full of jewels, and that really starts all the action for this movie, and she is delightful.
She really is. Well, meanwhile, winning an Academy Award changed Jack's career, but it never seemed to change Jack himself. Having spent more than 40 years working in every corner of show business, he understood how unpredictable success could be. Awards were gratifying, but they didn't erase the years of struggling and wondering where that next paycheck was going to come from. So that perspective gave him something increasingly rare in Hollywood: gratitude,
yes.
right? I mean, producers suddenly realized what Broadway audiences had already discovered. Jack could bring extraordinary warmth and humor and personality to virtually any role. He was no longer simply filling out the cast. He became one of those actors whose presence immediately elevated a film.
Yes. And one of his most enduring roles would come shortly after this. And of course, we've already talked about it, was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory in 1971.
So good.
As Grandpa Joe, Jack really took a part that could have been just a stereotypical supporting role, and he elevated it and made it so much more than that, because he really showed this character's, his optimism and his vulnerability and his, mischievous humor, but best of all, his wonderment, because you really got the impression that winning that golden ticket was just as magical to Grandpa Joe as it was to Charlie.
It's so true.
Yeah. And it's just so true. And then, decades later, as new audiences are discovering Jack Albertson through this movie, they're not realizing that this is such a revered Academy Award-winning actor.
Yeah, so true. Well, the following year, he delivered another memorable performance in one of your favorite movies,
whoop, whoop.
The Poseidon Adventure.
Yes.
Amid spectacular special effects and an all-star cast, including Gene Hackman, Ernest Borgnine, Red Buttons, Stella Stevens, Carol Lindley, and Roddy McDowall, Jack, he really quietly grounds the film with his portrayal of Manny Rosen, the sweet Jewish grandfather who's traveling with his beloved wife, Belle, played by Shelley Winters, to see their grandson in Israel. I mean, it just kind of makes me a little weepy to think about it.
My heart.
Yes. Well, their devotion in the film is really the film's emotional center.
It is.
It reminds audiences that even the biggest spectacle depends upon characters that they genuinely care about, and you care about those two people.
Yes.
Behind the scenes, however, Shelley.
Shelley
was known to be, shall we say, a little difficult, maybe?
A little bit.
Yeah. Well, Albertson once said in a New York Times interview, and this is a quote, "Shelley? She's a damn good actress, but I don't take any crap from her, and we get along fine," which sounds about right.
A little sidebar, while they were making the movie, like Shelley Winters and Jack Albertson and I think Arthur O'Connell and another one of the actors, they would all play these fierce games of, I think it was either spades or hearts or something. And they would play for money, but it would all be IOUs. And by the time they finished making the movie, I think Shelley owed Jack something like $232,000.
Oh my gosh.
Which she never paid, and he's
always
talks about it. So.
Oh, wow, that is awful.
I know, but this is like the mid-1970s, and so TV actually beckoned, Jack Albertson, and he actually received another career-defining role, and that's in the sitcom Chico and the Man, which of course starred the great comedian Freddie Prinze. Again, this could have been stereotypical cranky man, because he plays Ed Brown, who's this very cranky, owner of this rundown garage in Los Angeles, whose life really transforms when he hires this young, energetic, optimistic young mechanic named Chico, played by Freddie Prinze. Jack Albertson really elevated the role, and he really showed you that beneath Ed's gruffness, there is this lonely widow, who really his whole life begins to change, and he really, his prejudices give way to friendship and affection, and a real new purpose in life, which is so beautiful. And the chemistry between Jack Albertson and Freddie Prinze, it is the foundation for this show. I mean, it is just amazing. And for his performance in Chico and the Man, Jack Albertson ended up winning an Emmy for Best Actor in a Comedy that year. But this was not his first Emmy, believe it or not, because the year before, and this is so random, but he won his first Emmy for a single guest star appearance on a variety show, which I don't even have that award anymore. And it was for the Cher variety show. So he was a two-time Emmy winner.
Well, off screen, the cast and crew of Chico and the Man were devastated at the sad suicide of Freddie Prinze in January 1977. Just horrific.
Oh, so sad.
Jack had grown particularly fond of the gifted young comedian, and in the aftermath of his death, he became an emotional anchor during one of the most difficult periods in the show's history. Those who worked with Jack at that time spoke not only of his professionalism, but also of his compassion, qualities that audiences had been sensing in his performances for decades.
Yeah. Now, Mabel, she remained one of the busiest and most reliable, actresses on television. And we've already mentioned all the shows she was on. You name it.
But there's more.
There's more. Perry Mason, Gunsmoke, That Girl, you name them. She was on it. But, to be a guest actor, that takes a really special skill set.
It does.
Because a lot of times they bring Nan, they bring the guest star in only a day or two before you film. So you have to have the ability to tap into an already existing rhythm, get in the groove of it, and then perform. That is not easy. And she made it look effortless.
Well, and although she appeared in countless memorable roles, as we've said, the role that people still remember her as is Mother Stevens on Bewitched, appearing in just 19 episodes, which to me says something about how wonderful her characterization was, because I would have sworn she was on twice that many.
Yeah, me too.
Right?
Me too. She left an impression.
Yeah. I mean, she created a character whose exasperation over Samantha's magical household became one of the show's most hilarious running gags.
Yes.
I would love to know how this line came up. Her familiar plea to her husband, Frank, take me home. I have a sick headache.
Oh, you did a very good Mabel Albertson.
Thank you so much. It became one of her character's signature lines, and really a signature of that show, right? Rather than competing with the so many scene stealers in that show.
Many.
I mean, between Agnes Moorehead, Marion Lorne, Paul Lynde, and Sandra Gould, Mabel complemented all of them so beautifully, grounding the comedy with reactions that always felt authentic. I mean, I remember scenes, having just watched one recently, with Agnes Moorehead. And Agnes Moorehead has all that makeup on and that flowing costume.
She's like a peacock.
She is. She's the peacock.
Yeah.
And Mabel Albertson does not try to compete with that. And so they both shine because of that contrast. So
to hold your own with those people,
oh boy,
Mabel's all right.
Yeah. Well, she excelled at playing wealthy socialites, daffy aunts, opinionated mothers, nervous landladies, and really lovable busybodies. She became one of those rare performances that people recognize instantly, even if her name occasionally escaped them. For a character actor, that's the highest compliment.
Oh, it really, really is. Now, by the late 1970s, Jack and Mabel, they had accomplished more in their career than either of them ever imagined possible when they were growing up in poverty in Massachusetts. Which is, tells you a lot about them and their fortitude and their ambition. They had survived the collapse of vaudeville, and they had transitioned over to radio. They had made movies, and they had really found their niche and fame and recognition on television. I think they covered more eras of entertainment than maybe anybody, and they did it so seamlessly. Now, Jack's final years were productive, even though he was starting to decline in health a little bit. And even after earning, an Oscar and a Tony and a couple of Emmys, it never really went to his head, like you mentioned. You
Mhm.
know, most people described him as he was still that old vaudevillian who was just so grateful to still be working and still being able to do his craft, because that's
Mhm.
what really mattered to him. And success never really erased the hard times that he grew up with. And in fact, I think the struggles he had as a younger man really helped him appreciate and, like you said, be grateful for the opportunities that he did get.
Well, Mabel continued appearing regularly on television, bringing the same warmth, intelligence, and impeccable comic timing that had made her a favorite of television producers for decades. She had perfected the delicate balance between comedy and sincerity.
Yeah.
Her characters could be opinionated without becoming unpleasant. They could be funny without becoming caricatures, and affectionate without slipping into sentimentality. It was a gift that few performers
Yeah.
possessed. Her final screen performance was starring alongside her daughter-in-law,
That's right.
Cloris
Yeah.
Leachman, in the TV movie Ladies of the Corridor in 1975. Now, Jack's final screen performance was in the TV movie Terror at Alcatraz, a very strange comedy that starred the Smothers Brothers, and it was released after his death.
And sadly, Jack Albertson passed away November the 25th, 1981, after a short bout with cancer. He was 74 years old. And this was a man who spent half a century perfecting his craft and really earning the respect of his colleagues because of his generosity, his humility, and his unwavering professionalism.
Well, and less than a year later, on September 28th, 1982, Mabel Albertson also passed away at the age of 81. Her death attracted fewer headlines maybe than her brother's, but television viewers knew exactly what American entertainment had lost.
Yeah.
Through hundreds of appearances, she had become part of the fabric of classic television, representing the dependable excellence upon which so many successful series quietly relied.
Yeah. And, you know, you look back on it today, and, you know, the thing that strikes me about Jack and Mabel Albertson, you know, it's not the number of, performances they gave. It's not about the awards that they won.
Mhm.
It was really about how they approached their profession. I mean, they understood that, you know, supporting roles were just as important sometimes as the leading roles, and that's how they approached their work. And they also understood that memorable characters, they weren't created by number of lines. They were created by the honesty that you recited these lines. And that's what they
Mhm.
both did so beautifully, so well. And that's why we are honoring them today.
Well, let's remind listeners and viewers of this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
You know, as we talked about, Jack Albertson won a Tony and an Oscar for his performance in The Subject Was Roses. There's 9 other performers who did the same thing. They won the Tony and the Oscar for playing the same role. How many of those can you name? I had to admit, I had to look it up. I could name like
Yes.
4, so
Yeah.
it's a tough one.
All right. Should we go for it?
All right, let's just go. Here
Yeah.
we go. Jose Ferrer, Cyrano de Bergerac.
Yeah.
Shirley Booth, Come Back Little Sheba.
Yep.
Yul Brynner, The King and I, which is one of the ones I did remember. And another one I remembered was Anne Bancroft, The Miracle Worker.
Right.
Rex Harrison for My Fair Lady. Paul Schofield for Man of All Season. Joel Grey for Cabaret. Lila Kidrova for Zorba the Greek. And Viola Davis recently for Fences.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It's good
more,
company.
It's more than I thought.
Yeah, I thought there would be, because I thought of the question and I thought, well, there's going to be maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I had no idea there was 10.
Good thing there weren't like 50. We'd be still talking.
I would have skipped that question.
Well, thanks everyone for spending this time with us. We would so appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star review wherever you're listening. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. You can also find us on social media. Our handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign. You can find us on Facebook and on Instagram.
And we love your emails. Please keep them coming. You can email us anytime at info@beneaththehollywoodsign.com.
That's this week's view.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Ann McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review, and tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. Associate producer and researcher John Price Ritchie. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2026, all rights reserved. That's a wrap.